All right, guys. We have a special guest today on this episode of Attacking the Paint. I have Amin Elhassan, formerly of ESPN and the new host of the Basketball Illuminati podcast. Amin, thank you so much for jumping on. I really appreciate you taking the time.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So first things first. I always try to get to know my guests a little bit. So I did a little research. I know that you moved to the U.S. from the Sudan when you were young. Talk to me about the early transition or what you remember from it, if you remember anything.
It wasn't really a transition because I was 4 months old when I came over.
Oh, okay.
So
So I didn't know how
yeah,
you were.
so
Okay.
yeah, so for me it was pretty straightforward.
Okay.
The bigger transition, I moved back to Sudan when I was 8 years old,
Okay.
and I came back here when I was 14. So those were kind of the bigger shifts for me because it was new experiences and doing things differently than
Right.
what I've been accustomed to doing my entire life at that point.
Gotcha. So I guess talk about that then. I guess talk about being in the states until you're 8, and then going back. Was it just complete culture shock? I mean, I know growing up I
Right.
guess in at home, there's still some cultural stuff that's obviously there. So I guess it maybe wasn't completely out of the box, but
Oh,
like, what was the difference?
Oh, it was huge out of box because you got to think about it. This is at a time there was no internet or anything like that. So whatever I knew in the home was not. I mean, it just there was nothing that could prepare you for going over there and dealing with things that were just a way of life there. But for me and for us, it was just something new in terms of power outages and things on ration. Got to buy sugar on ration and
Wow.
eggs on ration and stuff like that. And then probably when I was 10, we had a revolution and the democratically elected government was overthrown and it was taken over by the military. And it was kind of, a little bit into that. They turned into a kind of a religious kind of theocracy and no freedoms and all that stuff. And that's what I thought my life was going to be the rest of my life. And then I came back to New York at 14, and in a weird way, I had a culture shock coming back the other way, like the idea
Mm,
of just people being able to express freedoms and things like that. That those were things that I wasn't accustomed to. And so you're just trying to kind of keep up. At some point you get used to like, okay, well, this is life, and then everything gets thrown for a loop again. So very early in my life, I had to get adjusted to change and kind of
mhm.
like uncertainty.
Gotcha. I guess that's one of the things that I guess people always say that kids are resilient. It's probably a resiliency there too. The fact that I guess, and then you move back to like the most fast paced city in the world, right? Or one of the most
Yeah,
fast, and so that's probably a complete culture shock as well. And in high school, so now like there's all these other variables of things. There's culture, fashion, girls,
yeah,
I mean, all that stuff too. And so I guess that could be a lot for sure. Um, my family, I was born in Chicago. We moved to Georgia when I was 3. So I always when I was younger, I used to always tell people I was from Chicago, but the older I got,
right.
the more I realized I wasn't from Chicago.
You're not from Chicago.
I'm not from Chicago.
Yeah,
And so like you go to Chicago on for like, weddings or family
right,
reunions. And so like all I knew was like good, safe Chicago. So I had never experienced all
right,
the other stuff that my older brothers experienced and that my parents experienced. And
right.
so I went back summer of '96, and I think I was 14 when I stayed the summer for the first time, and I was with my cousin in the hood, and so that was the first time
Hmm.
I got to see the other side of Chicago. So like
Right.
I got chastised about what colors to wear, what I couldn't wear. Hey, you can't go to the park
how
wearing this.
how your hat was on? Like what?
Yep. Yep, you can no tilts one way or the other, no
Yeah.
tilts. Yeah, like I mean, one time I never forget this. I had a burgundy T-shirt on, and
Hmm.
she was like, "You can't wear that." I was like, "Why?" She's like, "Because it's red." I was like, "It's not red, it's burgundy." In my head, I'm like, "This is not red," and my cousin was like, "You can't wear that to the park. Like, there's no way you
They
can
don't
wear that to the
care.
park." Yeah, they don't care. And so that was like so that was my experience like young, and then realizing like, yeah, I'm really not from here. I'm from Atlanta, and this
Yeah.
is this is completely, even the way I dressed, I carried myself different. Like it was a completely different
Right.
thing. um So I guess next thing. So like high school in New York. Where'd you go to high school?
So I ended up going to a private school called the UN school. The UNIS is what it's called.
Okay.
And so for me, I mean, it was just kind of one of those things where it doesn't matter where I went to school, it was going to be a huge culture shock because, like all the things that you mentioned, it was just like these are things that I missed out on.
Yeah.
And for me, it was weird because I think I always say this: if I had an accent, I think I would have gotten away with a lot more because
Hmm.
people would just say, "Oh, he's not from here."
Right.
But because I didn't have an accent, I spoke very close to how I speak right now.
Hmm.
I got enough fights because it would be legit misunderstandings. People would say things, and I would be like, so for instance, like when I was growing up, if someone said, "What's up?" That's not "Hey, how's it going?" That's like "What's up? What's going on?" Like that's an act of aggression.
Right.
But I didn't know any better. I was like, "Oh, what's up? What's up with you?" And they're
Right.
like, "Oh, this one guy want to talk, right?" So I'm still like, "Wait, what's happening here?" I would get into fights. I don't even know how it started.
Right.
So there was a lot of that going on. But it was cool. I was all right. I was safe, I guess.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Did you play ball in high school at all?
Yeah, I played basketball. I ran track. I played soccer. I was a little bit of everything.
Okay.
I love basketball, but like honestly, at the time, it was probably the third best sport I was good at.
Okay. Okay. See, I grew up playing everything. So football, baseball,
Yeah,
basketball, I ran track.
yeah.
Um, in eighth grade to ninth grade, I was probably a better football player. I was a free safety. My like growing up, I was
Mhm.
a aggressive little something, right? And I played football up until ninth grade, and going, I guess, yeah. So ninth grade going into 10th grade, and I went to spring practice for 10th grade, and everybody grew except me. And so
You showed up one day and everybody
everybody was
stopped.
just huge.
Yeah,
Everybody was huge.
yeah.
Everybody was huge, and I was
That
like,
sounds like Georgia, all right.
"Hey, listen, it
I don't know
was
what's in the water.
I don't know. It's something." So I was like, I think I'm gonna play basketball. I remember telling my older brother Chris, I was like, I think I'm just gonna play basketball. He's like, why? I was like, dude, if you had saw these if you saw these kids,
Yeah.
and so and I think what got me too was that year the first football game of the season was against. I don't know if you remember Jamal Lewis played for
Yeah. For yeah. For
yep,
yeah.
the Ravens.
Was it
So
Tennessee? But he went to Tennessee or what?
Tennessee. He
Yeah.
went to Tennessee,
Yeah.
and so Jamal was a senior, and he was starting at running back and linebacker for Douglas High School.
Doug. Yeah, he went to
Yeah,
Doug. That's
he went to
right. Yeah.
Doug, and
Where'd you go
so
to high school?
well, at that time I was at Southwest DeKalb. At that time I was at Southwest DeKalb.
South went to Cab. Okay. All
Yeah,
right.
and
Yeah.
so which was a powerhouse, but like I wasn't like
Yeah.
again I yeah. So
You ain't Jamal Lewis.
yeah, exactly. And I played free safety. I was like, so I remember telling my brother, I was like, there's no way I'm trying to tackle this dude.
It's a
And he was like,
business decision.
right.
Yeah.
And he was like, what do you mean? I was like, Chris, there's no way I'm tackling this dude. Like, and I was a tactical. So I would always go for knees and legs because I
Yeah.
wasn't
Yeah.
big enough. So I was like, I saw this dude literally like knee somebody in the chin and lift him up. I was like, in film, I was like, nope, I'm done. I'm a basketball player for the rest of my life. And I just made that decision that it was just, and again, basketball was probably like, it was my second or third best sport, but like, it
Right.
wasn't, I had to make the decision that that's what I was going to do.
Right.
So, um, so from high school, I know that you came down to Atlanta. You went to Georgia Tech,
Yeah.
study engineering, right?
Yeah. That's right.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. I just want to make sure you do research sometime, and people may put the wrong stuff on the
Yeah.
internet. So just
All
want
the
to
time. Yeah.
make
People say I graduated from Georgia Tech. I'm like, I did not do that. I have no degrees from Georgia Tech.
gotcha.
No, it's
Yeah.
funny, but I had a lot of friends, obviously from Atlanta, and a lot of them went to Doug. So
Okay. Okay.
like these are all like, it's fun, man. It's fun to hear some of these names and stuff, man. 'Cause especially on the football side, I didn't know too many basketball players from the state of Georgia. Like I didn't know
Mm-hmm.
them personally, but like Robert Edwards and Chris
Mm-hmm.
Edwards and Jamar Clark and like all those, like I knew all those guys
Mm-hmm.
because I was friends with people they went to high school with. So
Right.
and Jamal Lewis, I knew this guy that went to Doug was a couple classes ahead of him. So like it's funny how small Atlanta is when it comes to stuff like that. Like
Yep.
everybody know everybody. So that's funny. Yeah.
Gotcha. It really is small too. The funny thing is when no matter where I go, I run into somebody. It's just this small circle of people. And then the crazy thing is this, like, even when you're out of the city, you'll run into somebody who's from here that you've never met before, but they know 7 people
Right.
that you know. And it's just
Right.
like,
Right. Yeah.
there's all this, camaraderie immediately just because of it.
Yeah.
I remember I worked in G League. This guy was playing for he was playing for Iowa Stampede at the time. And I can't remember his name, but he was like from Atlanta too. And I was like,
Mm-hmm.
why don't I know you? And he was like, I went to Stevenson. And I was like, it's just one of those things that you start looking at him, like you look at him and like, maybe I remember your face a little bit. And then you call somebody who went to Stevenson and like, yeah, that's my homeboy. But it's just such a the basketball world is so small, but same thing just in Atlanta in itself is just, it's a small community of people. So talk to me about your experience at Georgia Tech. Like, what was that like? The time you were here. Were you living on campus? Did you live off campus?
Yeah, no, I lived on campus, and then I ended up moving off campus later on, and um it was just one of those things where I went to school because I didn't know any better. I just thought like you go to school and you get a degree in whatever you do, and that's it. Like there's not a whole lot of you don't have a choice pretty much.
Right.
Like I went to school because I thought I was going to get a job doing what I go to school to do.
Right.
And so at some point, when I was probably like either my sophomore or junior year, I was, my roommate woke me up. My roommate, his name's Ken Cummings. He's from Waco. He's from Washington County.
Okay. Yep.
Right? So he was like, hey, it was a Saturday morning. He said, hey, man, the Hawks are hiring. We should go down. They got a job fair. They're hiring. We should go down there. And I told him, like, man, get out of my room, man. It's Saturday, 6 a.m. We were up late the night before. I'm not trying to hear none of that. He's like, no, come on, man. That'll be fun. Da da da. I said, man, they're not going to hire us. He said, you don't know that. I said, there are going to be 100,000 people there. It's not going to be, it's not, like, he just kept, like, persisting. And I was like, this ain't going to happen. And then he said, who knows? We might be able to go to some games for free. And when he said that, I thought to myself, okay, maybe. So that's what got me out of the bed, and we went down there, and sure enough, there were about like 1,000 people, whatever, and I want to say they hired 6 people, and we were 2 of the 6.
Wow.
And this was for their field marketing, which is basically a glorified street team.
Mm-hmm.
We would go to different malls, and on the weekend, we'd set up like a Papa shot and measure your hand size against the Kembe Mutombos and your sneaker size with like Allen Henderson or whatever, and kind of like one of those things. And through that, like I got to know some people, and I was like, okay, this is something I think I might want to do. And so at the end of the year, like the best people off that squad would get promoted to work in arena promotions, game operations, etc. And so me and my buddy Ken, we were 2 of the ones that got promoted, and we got there, and there I got to know people, like people in basketball ops and people working the team. And Rick Mahorn was an assistant coach. Rick's still a friend of mine to this day, but I say all the time, Rick Mahorn was the first real NBA person I knew. And that's how I knew, okay, I don't want to just work in sports or just work in basketball. I want to work in basketball operations. So that's when I made up my mind. I'm not gonna be an engineer anymore. I'm gonna try and transfer to a place that had a sports business program and kind of set my sights on working in basketball from there.
Okay. And where did you end up transferring for that?
Arizona State.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
Phoenix. Is that how you ended up in Phoenix?
Yep. So
okay.
Phoenix.
So for me, I'll tell you. So I went to a small school called Bryan College. It's an NAIA school in Tennessee. I played basketball for a hot second. Grades were horrible. I was a basketball junkie that didn't like school at all, and so got on the team. Couldn't stay on the team because I didn't have grades, and so ended up leaving school. Going to like 3.5 years in. I think I ended up with like 30 transferable credits. So I was a horrible student at the time.
Right. Same, by the way. I was also a horrible student.
So the thing that helped me was when I found sports management was the first time I ever got good grades in my life. It was because it was the first time I think because I was an exercise science major there because it was the
Hmm.
closest thing to sports.
Right.
And I had decided that maybe I was going to be a PE coach or something like that. Just,
Right.
but it was science. It was like legit, like a science major. So you had to take all the anatomy and physiology and all that stuff, which kicked my ass. And
Right.
so I struggled. I just struggled. And so once I think I initially thought that I was and the truth is, the PE coach was probably like a backup plan. I wanted to be an agent at the time.
Right.
My desire was to be an agent, and the more I thought about it, or the more I researched it, the more I realized that like agents were like it was probably one of the hardest jobs to get into and one of the nastiest jobs to get into. And
Oh,
so
it's yeah, it's disgusting.
right. And so like, cause I remember like summers, I would like, we had some sports agencies around the city. I would like walk, I would, they always say be persistent, offer to
Yeah.
work for free, all that stuff. The truth is no one likes anybody persistent unless they want to be persistent. So like, if not, you
Right.
become a nuisance or a pest pretty
Right.
quickly to people. And so,
It's
I would,
yeah. The trick is to be pleasantly persistent. That's the hard
exactly,
part, right?
which is hard, which is something
Yeah.
I feel like I've kind of gotten as I've gotten older. But at the time, I was just like, just this is what I want to do. So I would go to like offices and try to, turn resumes in. No one would ever call you back. And this is
Yeah.
before you could cold call people really because the internet still had limited information on
Right.
the internet. Like now, kids can
Right.
pretty much get everything you want from anybody. You can find a phone number at some point.
You can
Um,
guess your email address.
yeah, seriously,
Yeah.
exactly. And so um, the more I tried, the more I realized it was so hard. And I remember the coach at the time at the school was like, James, have you ever thought about basketball operations? Which I didn't even know what that was, to be honest.
Hmm.
It was I knew the concept of like running the team and the GMs and all that
Right.
stuff. I didn't know that there was like I didn't know
A
that. And
term.
so
Yeah.
a term exactly. And I didn't know like
Yeah.
I had no idea how to get into it. It was kind of the same pursuit, but it seemed more reasonably accessible
Right.
because no one's trying to cut your throat. Even
Right.
technically, they really are. It's the same thing, really. Like it's
Yeah.
but for me, when I found it, and then found the degree to match, it made life a lot easier because
Right.
it was something that I could attain. It was something that I could pursue, and it was
Right.
something that it made life a
It's
lot.
yeah. It's funny because I like I I didn't want to be an agent because I thought you had to have a law degree. That you
Mhm.
had to be a lawyer, and I was like, I'm not trying to do all that. So that's literally that's the only reason why.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously later on, after I work in the business and I got to know agents, I realized, oh my god, yeah, it's an
Right.
awful job. But at the time, I would have done it if I hadn't thought like, oh, it requires some schooling that I wasn't prepared to do.
Right. Right. Same thing. I took the LSAT. I took the LSAT, bombed
Oh
it.
man,
I
so you
bombed.
like you made the steps. Like I was like, nah, I'm good.
Yeah, but for me, it was when I found sports management though, I was like, this is what I'm supposed to do. Because I realized I wasn't a bad student. I just wasn't, it was one of those things
Motivated.
like I wasn't motivated. I wasn't
Yeah.
encouraged to do it at all. And it made a huge difference, it made a huge difference. Um, so you transferred to Arizona State.
Yep.
And what's that process like? I guess tell me this. I mean, was family on board?
No, absolutely
With
not. I got immigrant family, man. Like, I might as well told them I was going to join the circus. Like that was as much of a like a shock I could have delivered to them as possible. But at the time, Arizona State had a really good business school,
Mhm.
and so uh, for me, what I told them was like, "Oh, I'm gonna go there, and it's a top 25 business school in the country. I'll do that, and it'll be good. It'll be cool." And
Mhm.
worst case scenario, like I come out with a really good degree, and I ended up graduating with a dual degree in management and marketing.
Okay.
And then they had a graduate program in sports business that was really an MBA program, but like in the second year you had to pick a concentration, and some people had marketing and some people had finance, some people had supply chain management. I chose sports.
Mhm.
So kind of like I got through all of my schooling with something that on paper at least to my parents appeared to be straight up like a business degree from a good school, but really what it was just furthering my ambitions. But between me graduating undergrad and going to grad school, that's when I went to go work for the Knicks. I worked for the Knicks for a year in basketball operations, and that was a a pretty big part because I think that helped that definitely helped me get my son's job after that because it's like at that point now I've worked for two NBA teams and
Hmm.
in basketball ops for one of them and you know I wasn't kind of like just someone who's walking in starry eyed who didn't have any experience. So
Right. Right. You weren't one of the kids who say I want to be a GM with no type of understanding of
yeah,
what that
like,
is.
but
Yeah.
by the time I was coming to the Suns, I knew I didn't want to be a GM.
Right.
I knew that. Like they're like, "What do you want to do?" I was like, I want to work in basketball ops, and I just want to help a team be successful. And
Hmm.
wherever I rise, I'll rise. If it's like realistically, like I don't know if I told anyone this, but I thought to myself, I think I can get to be an assistant GM one day.
Hmm.
Like that's like the ceiling. But like realistically, I was trying to be director of basketball ops or
Right.
director of player personnel. That's what I thought. Like okay, this is where I'm going to end up being, and advancing past that. But assistant GM was kind of like, yeah, that'd be
Yeah.
nice one day.
Gotcha. Gotcha. So what was the, I guess before we can get to the Suns thing, so what was the experience like with the Knicks? Who was the G who was running the team at the
So
time?
Isaiah Thomas was the president of basketball operations. Glenn
Yep.
Grunwald was the general manager. And I want to say was Lenny Wilkins our coach. I can't remember whether it was Lenny or it might have been Don Chaney. Even I can't remember.
Okay.
But I remember at the beginning of my internship, I was just happy to be there. And then I
Hmm.
realized very quickly, like, there wasn't a whole lot of structure. I look at the kids who work now, who get internships in the league, and it's
Hmm.
so structured. They're making sure they're building their skill sets and with like specific programs, they have a roadmap. And back then, an intern was just someone that you had around to
Right.
help around the office, right? So for me, I got in there and I was happy, and then I realized really quickly, like I'm not doing much all day. Like I'm sending out some stuff on FedEx.
Hmm.
I'm doing some, little, hey, you need to run these over there, get this to the guys at Terrytown or whatever. But I wasn't really doing anything. So I started working on projects of my own,
Hmm.
and that I think like put people on like, oh, this guy's like he's a go getter or whatever, and
Hmm.
started getting more responsibilities through that. I used to transcribe. We had a scout of ours, Dickie McGuire. His jersey's retired. He's one of the played for the Knicks in the '50s or whatever,
Hmm.
and he's like one of the he's a famous scout. I guess I don't know if you can call it famous, but like one of the most famous scouts or whatever.
Hmm.
But Dickie was old school. Dickie wrote everything by hand, and we had a computer system, so it's my job to kind of transcribe his stuff, and then I whenever he would come in, he would hand me a stack, and we'd sit there and we'd talk. And so I learned a lot from him as far
Hmm.
as scouting and what he looks for. And, based on I ask him about his reports, like, oh man, you only wrote like 3 words on this one. He's like, look, man, we all know who can play, who can't play. Anything right beyond that is because you try to cover your ass in case you're wrong. So I learned a lot from him. And then the other guy that I learned a lot from during my time there was Frank Murphy. He was the vice president of basketball operations. He was the capologist. He is the
Okay.
first human to be called a capologist by anyone in sports at all
Oh
because
wow.
he was the one that was figuring out all the loopholes in the collective bargaining agreement to get guys paid. If you look up like the Charles Oakley balloon payment, the Patrick Ewing contract that had him guaranteed to be the highest paid player or one of the 3 highest paid players, and if he dropped out of that, it would automatically reset and raise him. This is all like in the Wild West before the collective bargaining agreement really
Right.
tightened down in 1995 and 99. And that was a lot of that was because of what guys like Frank Murphy were doing, just finding loopholes left and right. So those are the guys that I work closely with on a day-to-day basis and kind of learn things. And then Isaiah, obviously, he's been huge for me for my career as far as when I was working with the Knicks. He always always took the time whenever he was there. It's traveled like he travels a team,
Hmm.
and I didn't travel. I was always in New York, so it's like whenever he's around, he would always take the time. And then even since I left, he's always anytime he sees me, he's always got advice. He's always got something. So those are kind of like the main people that I kind of learned from in New
Gotcha.
York.
Gotcha. That's good stuff. I think it's one of those things that like, do you think based on how it was structured initially, if you didn't have those people that kind of poured into you, do you think you end up where you end up, like with those guys that are giving you?
No, I wouldn't have. But I would also say if I didn't like make an effort, I wouldn't. Like if I just did what I was asked of me, just
Mhm.
I would have. It would have been over. It would have been over, and then I would. I mean, I ended up going back to school after that anyway.
Mhm.
But I would have walked away from the experience saying like, "Oh yeah, I worked for the Knicks for a year and learned absolutely nothing."
Right.
And because I was motivated or self-starting, or whatever you want to call it,
Mhm.
I think that allowed me to walk away from that experience. A, having made an impression, I think that's
Mhm.
huge too.
Right.
But B, also having learned stuff and carried stuff along with me. That when I got to Phoenix, like I knew stuff. I
Right.
wasn't. It wasn't just a case of kind of like, all right, now you guys are going to teach me. Like, well, there's stuff that I knew how to do. There was stuff
Mhm.
I did for them that they hadn't had before or
Right.
learned before. So, yeah,
Gotcha. I think that's one of the most important aspects of it. Like those the ability to be a self starter first, and then the ability to kind of connect with people. Right. So
yeah,
I feel like relationships are so valuable. And even if you don't know that you're building relationships and where those relationships will lead, the value of those relationships, like you said, like you see Isaiah to this day, and he's still giving you words of encouragement, words of advice. Like
yeah,
that's one of those things that you can't like really you can that's school in itself in a sense, right?
yep,
Um, and I tell people all the time, like for me, like my ability to kind of be a people person and and innately a shy person by nature, right? So shy naturally, like I would rather not talk to people because most
right,
of the time I don't know what to say to somebody. So like, just in passing, I don't know, outside of a hello, you're not sure what to say. But I kind of pushed myself to kind of be more of a people
yeah,
person as I got older because I understood I had to be one. And but
yeah.
like, like
And that's
now,
a job, by the way. That's
yeah.
the weird thing. Like people want to say, "Oh, but like if I'm a good worker, why does it matter?" It's like, well, that's part of the job. Like
Mhm.
working in basketball is, in essence, being a people person.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And I feel like those kind of things, even like when I talk to people now, they're like, "What's your skill set?" I was like, I connect with people, and it's one of those things. Like if you talk to somebody long enough, you'll find some sort of commonality with someone, right? And I feel like a lot of
Yeah,
times the disconnect with most people when people say, "Oh, I don't know what it's like to walk in their shoes," I don't know all those whatever those little sayings people say. It's because
yeah,
you haven't had a conversation with somebody to realize that like
right,
he grew up how you grew up, or he experienced something that you experienced, or whatever the case may be. His parents were strict, like your parents were strict. Whatever it is,
right.
like there's something there, and if you take the time to talk to somebody, you'll pretty much figure that out. And I'll never
Yeah.
forget this when I was with the Charge, we had a player. It was so I got hired during the lockout season, and so I actually was technically I wasn't an employee of the Cavs, and since I was an employee of the Charge, I had free
Hmm.
reign to talk to people that the guys in the front office couldn't talk to because they were employees, and so
Right.
I got a chance to talk to like they put me in rooms with agents and like they would be
Prospects and stuff. Yeah.
prospects and stuff,
Yeah.
and so we had this one prospect, he was a kid from Detroit, and I'll never forget. I guess he thought I was just this, I don't know, square rich kid or something. I don't know. He put me in a box pretty much immediately. And
Right.
so we started talking, just randomly talking. And then I guess I kind of told him my story about like where I was from and like how I grew up. And he was like, "Man, I would have never known any of those things." And before you know it, like dude was like wants to exchange numbers. Like
Right.
me and him text for years after that. Like we got lost touch,
Right.
But it's one of those things that it was just by having a conversation, and I think the natural thing that most people do is put people in boxes because it's easy to decide, okay, well, he's this or she's that right away, as opposed to like really finding out who people are.
Right.
But the moment you do, you open up, a new world for yourself in theory, really.
Right.
Um, so so you leave New York after a year, and you end up going back to Phoenix right
Yep.
after
For
that.
grad school. For grad
Grad
school.
school.
Yep.
Gotcha. Gotcha. And so when did the transition from grad school to the Suns take place?
In the middle of grad school.
In
So
the middle of grad school.
so at that point now I kind of knew, look, this is what I'm going to do. I already
Right.
done did it. And now that I know I've done did it and I know it's not as out of reach as it was even a few years ago,
Mhm.
like I was more motivated than ever. So while I was in grad school, they were asking me like, "Oh, what do you want to do?" I said, "I'm going to work at basketball operations." And they told me at the time ASU had the number one sports business program, but they were like, nobody has ever left here to go work in operations. They usually work in marketing, or or on the sponsor side or something like that. And their whole thing is like, everyone wants to work in operations, but then you begin to realize there's so many more opportunities in sports, and you can get in. We're here, and you could do this, you could do that. And I'm like, that's all cool, but this is what I want to do. And they were
Right.
like, well, good luck, basically. And so midway through that first year, it was a 2-year program. Midway through that first year, I ended up getting a job for the Suns in their night call sales staff. This isn't even selling season tickets. This is like people who come in from like 6 to 9 every night and
Mm-hmm.
call people who had bought tickets to other events at the arena, and you're trying to sell them on buy a 3-game pack, buy a 5-game pack, whatever. And so my thing was like, obviously I didn't want to be in sales,
Mm-hmm.
but I thought to myself, if I'm working here, I'm gonna get an opportunity to meet people. That's one, but also whatever I do here is going to create what I like to call the infomercial. Like, so
Mm-hmm.
then when people ask, "Yo, do you notice the mean guy?" Oh yeah, oh he's great, da da da. And so I came in, and even there, like they had a system of doing things, and I'd worked when I was in college for. It's weird the things that you learn, right? I worked for a social science research labs, like so people would hire the school to do
Mm-hmm.
surveys, and we were in the call bank. And so you're in the call bank and you're coding every call, and that way afterwards, okay, these are the warm calls, these are like straight cold calls, these are people. So it just gives you kind of a little bit of you know an organizational advantage of waiting to see things, whatever. So I like at the Suns, they didn't have any of that. It was just like, your call, here's the number, blah blah blah.
Right.
But I was like taking notes and da da da, and so they were blown away, like, oh, this dude's got like a whole system or whatever. And so doing that, I got to know some people, and I thought I had an internship lined up for the summer between my first and second year, which is when we had to do an internship. And at the last minute, they told me they couldn't give me an internship because they gave it to the nephew of one of the part owners, who at the time was going to be a high school senior the following
Wow.
year. And
Wow.
I'm in grad school getting an MBA with with a concentration in sports business, with 2 degrees in undergrad,
Mm-hmm.
and from a top 25 school, and a sports business degree I was getting from the number one school in the country. That's when I realized none of that shit means anything.
Nope.
Nobody cares.
Nope.
Nobody cares. Nobody cares. Nobody cares. Right. So, but uh, I had the opportunity to work for this high school basketball tournament that was geared towards kids of Native American descent.
Okay.
I was to help them get looks to go to colleges because, as you know, many of the AAU sanctioned events or NCAA sanctioned events that featured AAU teams, it required you to have some geographic kind of tie to the area. Like you
Mm-hmm.
could have like 2 out-of-state guys or whatever.
Right. Right.
But like the Native American tribes were lobbying and said, look, many of our tribes were spread across a bunch of states. So, for instance, like the Navajos, they're in Utah and New Mexico and Arizona and Colorado. And it's like, well, how can we have a team that's one tribe, but like technically, because of the way the state lines are drawn, these people can't compete, whatever. So they lobbied, and they finally got like a sanction from the NCAA that allowed them to do a tournament based on tribes. So we
Mm-hmm.
had this tournament, brought in tribes from all over the country. You had Comanches and the Seminoles, and everyone like the Iroquois, and we had a team from Canada called First Peoples Nations, right? So this tournament was co-owned by Mark West, who was a VP with the Suns at the time, a former
Okay.
NBA player, and he was a VP in basketball ops. And so it was one of those things where it's like, all right, I can't go in through the front door. I'm gonna go through the side.
Mm-hmm.
Well, work for this thing. The company was real small. I think there were 4 employees putting on
Gotcha.
this whole thing. So I'm like, I get in there, I do a good job, and maybe that'll help me with someone who works with the Suns, and that'll open the door. And that's pretty much what happened. I did a good job there, and at the end of the summer, I was like, yo, I tried to get in with y'all, and it didn't work out. And like Mark made a phone call, and next thing I know, they're like, yo, you're starting on Monday. And so I came in on the Monday, and I want to say like Friday, everybody left to go to Europe for training camp, because that was the year that the Suns did the European tour. They did training camp in Italy, and then
Mhm.
they went to Israel and Spain and all these other places. And so I was there by myself in the office for like 2 weeks or whatever. And
Wow.
I remember thinking, this is just like the way the Knicks thing started. It's like, you're by yourself, you're here, congratulations,
Mhm.
but like no one's giving you anything.
Right.
So I remember one of the things I had at my disposal was they had um, this rating system that they ran all the players in the league through this rating system on their stats, and it would spit out like a number, and that was supposed to kind of represent, these guys are, they do things that are closer to what our system wants, right?
Right.
And so I took the formula, I reverse engineered it, I figured out what the formula was,
Mhm.
and then I applied it to every player in college basketball, every player in D1, 330 schools or whatever it was.
Right.
And so when they came back, I remember I handed Griff like, here, top to bottom. And like, I'm not telling you that these guys are perfect for us or not perfect for us. I'm just telling you, I took your number system and I applied it to all the players. And so I think that was like Griff was like, oh, like I didn't give this guy anything to do. He comes back 2 weeks later, he's got this massive project done.
Right.
And then there was, I remember working with the coaching staff, and they, every time they played a team, obviously they have like the post mortem, right? Like, okay, what did we run? What did they run against us? What worked? What didn't work? Da da da. And it was kind of like notes. Everything was notes. So they wanted like something more formalized, like
Mhm.
something A that they could type in, and B that they could scrape and keep track of all these things. So I
Right.
created all that stuff. So the coaches were like, oh, this guy's pretty useful. And then finally, like on opening night, um, I remember our video guys, they used to use Exos to
Mhm.
cut video, and the computers crashed on opening night. They're not
Wow.
computer guys, they didn't know. So I was like, well, let me take a look at it, and I kind of troubleshot it and figured some shit out. And like I saved the day, and they were like, oh shit, this guy's useful to have around. So it was like one of those things where it's like no one
Mhm.
told me to do anything, but I realized, you got to create value
Mhm.
where they don't even know value exists.
Yeah.
And that's kind of like in my first, probably, let's say 2 or 3 months
Mhm.
working for the Suns. I let it be known I'm not like a regular college kid just happy to be here. I bring value to the table.
No, I think like you're pretty much linchpin is what that is. Like that's I read this book like linchpins are indispensable. Like when you add value into wherever lane there needs value to be put in. That's what you did. I mean, I feel like a lot of times a lot of kids who come into these situations are looking to be taught everything. They want to do it. They want someone to take a chance on them, and they want to be shown how to do it because they think they can do it. But the truth is, there's not a lot of time for all that stuff, right? So typically, what happens is you get passed around or you get left alone, right?
Yeah.
Like I had
Yeah.
the same thing. Like I got left alone a lot, or I had to I had to figure stuff out for myself all the time. And even in my business now, I'm always figuring out, okay, what is something that someone needs? What is
Right.
how do you add value to something? And so like identifying or just figuring things out or being useful in a punch or in a pinch rather. Like a lot of people, I always tell people, uh, if you can find someone who can handle adversity, you found a keeper pretty much because
Right.
more often than not, shit's gonna go wrong, right? So
Right.
like people want things to go right, people want things to go smooth, but the fact of the matter is, like you said, open night, computers crash.
Yep.
So, like what do you do? Like no one expected it, no one's prepared for it, no one knows how to fix it. Um, Funny thing, my first night with the charge opening night, we were supposed to like me and another guy were responsible for getting the game recorded to go to NBA TV for the I guess for their law, and the other guy didn't hit record, and so there's no game to transfer over to
Nice.
right. So luckily, and this is my people skills come in because I was already talking up to the guys who were actually filming the game. I just in Pasco, they were there 3 hours early, I was there 3 hours early, just have a conversation. You go up to them and in 5 minutes they give you a dubbed copy of the game.
Yeah.
Just but no one thought to ask. No one would have asked. But it's one of those things that like you find a way out of no way pretty much. And so
Right.
and again you show your value. And because it's one of those things that no one's thinking about. No one knows no one knows this stuff's going to happen. But I feel like the ability to handle yourself in crisis is the sign of a really good person, or
Right.
a valuable person. And so, but most people, in case the point, the high school, freshman who's, or senior whose uncle was, a part owner of the team, has no adversity. He has no struggle, and so he's probably looking around like, what the fuck? Like, I don't know what to do either. So yeah, so talk to me about so by opening night, you've shown your worth.
Right.
What's the process from there? Like what how do your roles increase? Like,
So yeah, so now I'm the video guys are leaning on me for stuff. They need this, they need that, and I'm helping them there. The at the time Synergy was still kind of new. So I had learned how to use Synergy. So now when the scouts and the front office people want to watch tape on a college guy or whatever, it used to be the video guys had to sit there and make tape. Hey, I want to watch some Joakim Noah. All right, give me a second. Let me pull all this Florida stuff and let me get them and cut them. These are transition plays, whatever. So now Synergy's in play. Like, I'm like, I can run it all on Synergy, and you guys don't have to worry about anything.
Right.
And they're like, cool, this guy's making our life easier. We get to focus on, the team stuff, which obviously, we're at that time we're a championship contending team. That's the priority for them. So that allowed me to work a lot closely with the scouts. And the cool thing about Phoenix, we didn't have a big staff. I don't know how it was in Cleveland, but like in Cleveland, in Phoenix, it was so that first year it was literally Griff, Mark West, Todd Quinter, John Shoemate. That might maybe one or two or more scouts, like 5 or 6 people, less than 10 people.
Right.
That was the entire front office.
Wow.
So there was an opportunity for me to be utilized a lot because they needed help. We didn't have a lot of manpower. It wasn't like, I remember marveling at like Houston. There was a video coordinator who just worked with like the advanced scouts. And then there was another video coordinator who just did the team breakdowns. And there was another video coordinator who just did opponent breakdowns. And then there was one who did only college stuff. And then there's one who did only international stuff. And and we're like, we've got 2 people plus me, an intern. And when I became a video coordinator, because the assistant video coordinator went to Memphis, then it just became 2 people. There was no intern for that.
Yeah.
So it was just a weird experience to see, like, some teams are like, yeah, we have like an army of people, and for us it's like, yeah, you better be pulling some long hours and stuff. But it was cool because you got to learn a lot of different things, and you got to work with people and show your value and show your worth, and they in turn like put some trust in you and put more responsibility in you. And one of the great things that I got out of my first 4 years in Phoenix was I got to do a bit of everything. I did analytics, and I worked with guys on the floor, and I went and scouted, and I put together scouting, coordinated scouting, and I did salary cap stuff, and I did, there was nothing I didn't do. The only thing I think I didn't do was advanced scout. I didn't advance. That's the one thing I didn't do, and I didn't want to do that anyway. So that was a blessing. But other than that, like, I did a little bit of everything.
Right.
And that was a cool thing at the beginning of my career, was just being able to grow, and people were willing to teach. I remember, Steve Kerr, when he came on my second year, and he was saying, like, showing me, hey, well, we send someone down to the G League. You got to send the thing to the NBA, notifying them. You got to do this, you got to do that. And he's like, because one day it's going to be you. You're going to have to do that stuff. I'll never forget he said that. And I was like, oh, wow. So when we started sending guys to the G League, I would go down with them. And at the time, our G League, our affiliate head coach was Nick Nurse. So I got to know Nick Nurse, and I hung out with Nick Nurse, and And so you meet people and you kind of just interact with people and get to kind of create a reputation for yourself, but also learn a lot. And
Yeah.
my first 4 years were just awesome for that.
Yeah. For sure. I think we have that. We have that in common. So my experience in the G League was very similar to that. So it was the first year of the team. So it was the first year of the charge. So they
Right.
were all, it was so there was not on purpose, but there wasn't structure because they didn't know what structure.
Oh, but I said, well, now it's different. But like at the time, every G League team was like
Right.
that. Like
Right.
there was nothing, so you just kind of like try to figure it out as you went along.
Right.
And there, if we were shorthanded, they're even more shorthanded down
Mm-hmm.
there, right?
Yep.
So it's
Exactly.
like the opportunity to do. I tell kids all the time, like you wanna make a name for yourself, go work in the G League,
Yeah.
because you'll be doing everything. You'll do everything from marketing and game promotions to scouting to, man, you might have to tape somebody up one day.
Hey, listen. I mean, I when I say I did everything, I did
Yeah.
so I was player personnel
Right.
manager. What that was the title, right? And so I know what that was, So like,
Yeah.
so Wes Wilcox was the GM. So
Yep.
Wes was the GM. Alex Jensen was the head coach, our first head coach.
Yep.
Thomas Scott was the assistant coach. And that was pretty much it. Ira Newell was like a
That's the
volunteer
staff.
coach. Yeah. And so
Yep.
Ira would come in and out at times, but like pretty much that was it. That was the entire coaching staff, basketball operations department. That was it. And Wes was with the club. So Wes would come down when he could, but so he wasn't even there every day.
Right.
So I advanced scouted. I regular scouted. I was on the court doing practice. I was on the bench doing games. I cut film. I drove players to practice.
Yep.
I was responsible for signing new players. I was responsible for making when we release players. I was responsible for guys getting their tax stuff done.
Yeah.
I mean, you name it.
Help guys find somewhere to live.
Help guys, literally help guys find guys find somewhere to live.
I helped Goran Dragic get a social security number and a driver's license.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So yeah, so that was one of those things. I remember I remember one time it was like a church group. Like they came to a game and they were like, well, somebody's got to speak after the game. And it was supposed to be Coach Jensen, but Coach Jensen's like, I'm not doing it.
Yeah.
And then Thomas was like, I'm not doing it. And I was like, James, you do it. I was like, what am I supposed to be doing? And so literally like you're supposed to be giving this like speech to like this youth group at the game in the stands, like in the middle of the court. I was like, what are you doing? Like, what am I supposed to be doing? So you find like, what am I supposed to be saying? So you got to sit there for 5 minutes and try to say something encouraging without dropping an F-bomb, which is hard for me to do at the time. And so, so it was just one of those things. But like when I walked away from that experience, like I felt so comfortable in myself, knowing a little bit of everything. And then what the most gratifying part was like they hired 3 people to do the job I was doing after I left. Yeah. So that was the most gratifying part, is that like the job I did, it was 3 people doing it when I left. Like next year, they're like, oh, we've got to, I did laundry too. I was a laundry guy, I did everything. So, but it's just one of those things like to like literally like cut your teeth in a fast paced environment on a regular basis. Like, I mean, my girlfriend at the time, she would come down and like, I would work like 16 hours and just be from the time I woke up until bed, I was just moving. And so she was like, when are you going to stop? I was like, I don't, this is like my day. Like I may stop and get food like in passing, but other than that, like I'm running from the time I open my eyes to the time I go to sleep every day.
I tell people all the time, from that first year I was interning for the Suns until I think I worked my first 850 consecutive days or something like that. Like I did not take a single day off, not even in the middle of August.
Wow.
I worked every single day. No Christmas, no New Year's, no Thanksgiving, no birthday, no St. Patty's Day, nothing. I worked every single day. Now, did I work 20 hours a day? No. Obviously, in August, some days you can work 4 or 5 hours a day and you're done.
Right.
But when I say I worked every day, like I was either in the office every day or I was on the road. But there was never a day where like I'm going to spend 24 hours doing me.
Right.
I mean, like I didn't even think it wasn't even a thing where someone told me, hey, you can't go home. It's like I didn't think that there was any other option.
Right.
Like, do you want to do this or not?
No, that makes that. I mean, and you're doing something you love. And so like a lot of times, like for me, I always tell people it was up until now, what I'm doing now, it was the best job I had because I didn't feel like I was working ever.
Right.
I was doing what I wanted to do. I enjoyed it. I was having fun, you know. So like for me, it was even in the moments where you're like absolutely frustrated with everything. Like
Right.
it's still better than selling cars, you know, which I've done. You know,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
still better than working security, which I've done. You know, like all those
Right.
things. Like you have to look at it like, well, I've done a lot of other stuff. Like this is still way better than that. You guys were a championship contending team.
Yep.
You guys were from my memory point, one of the first teams to play like, you know, just 4 out 1 in kind of
Yep.
basketball. I know the Bulls were similar, like that second stint of the Bulls, you know, where they played pretty much Michael, Scotty, Ron, Tony.
Yeah. Yeah, but they had a lot of stuff on the block.
Right,
There
right, right,
was a
right,
lot of stuff on the we were a true 4 out.
right,
Like
right,
whereas I mean, they were inverted more than anything, right?
right.
Where they had Michael on the
Michael,
block and Tony on the block, and then they'd lift Luke Longley or whatever, and
right,
he'd play
right.
out of the high post. Yeah.
Right, right. And but so for me, like you guys are the inception or the introduction to modern basketball, in my opinion,
Yeah.
right? And I'm sure you've heard that before. Like,
Yeah.
what is that like first? Like, how does that is that just Mike doing that? Just this is how I want to play. Is this the European style basketball that he brought over? Like, how does that come to be, and how do you sell people on that, right? Because
Yeah.
like you talked about like selling, like you have to sell people on a completely different style of basketball, and
Right.
because everyone knows the traditional way.
Well, I mean, it depend. Who are you talking about selling?
Well,
Selling what people?
I guess
Which
like
people?
just every I like for like I guess like for a coach to come in, I guess he has to sell it. He has to sell it to the players first, but I'm sure he has to sell it to like the front office before he sells it to the
Right.
players because they've got to agree to bring them on for that purpose.
So I wasn't there when they start. By the time I got there, it was already it works, right?
It was
It wasn't
rolling.
a
It was rolling.
question.
Okay,
It's
gotcha.
like it works. Like, but as I understand it, yes, it was Mike's thought about like this is how we played in Europe, and you know if you have skill, you can beat size, and we didn't
Mm-hmm.
have a particularly big team, and so that was the idea there. And Brian Colangelo was the GM at the time. So BC was, you know, very heavily influenced by European basketball.
Mm-hmm.
So he was kind of on board. And so by the time I got there again, the team had already been doing it that way. And so
Mm-hmm.
from my standpoint, it was one of those things where it's like, you know, our front office is more about, all right, this is how we play. Let's go get the players that play that way
Right.
or that can flourish in this style. And for us, it became like, because we were so different from everybody else,
Mm-hmm.
it was a massive advantage. Most teams couldn't match up with us just on a night-to-night basis.
Right.
And not only that, but we were able to find value in players that the rest of the league were like, oh, he can't play, or he's too small to do this, or
Mm-hmm.
the guys that were outcasts in other places fit perfectly for what we want them to do. So, for instance, like bigs that can't post up, we
Mm-hmm.
don't care because we don't post up. So if you're telling me you can catch and you can dunk, dog, all you got to do is set a screen and roll hard. And
Mm-hmm.
so a lot of that stuff was kind of building, catering towards the system we ran. I
Mm-hmm.
remember we used to always look at Utah and like we would think, man, it'd be cool to be like Utah in the sense that they had a coach and they had a system, and all the front office worried about was like we're getting players that fit our stuff. If you
Right.
don't fit our stuff, it's cool. You're not for us, right?
Right. Right.
And Utah was, perennially great, and Jerry Sloan could have coached until he until the day he passed away,
Mm-hmm.
and if he had wanted to. But that was kind of like our approach is, all right, we're going to go get guys like that. But again, everyone was already bought in by the time I got there.
Gotcha. Gotcha.
But as far as players, though, like, hey, you want to play faster and get more shots up? Like, yeah, it wasn't that hard of a sales pitch. Now, the problem is, like the harder, not the harder thing, but like you're trying to get them to understand the concept of shoot it or move it, right?
Right.
Because the worst thing you could do in our system was be a ball stopper,
Mm-hmm.
right? Steve, obviously, he could do whatever because
Mm-hmm.
he was a maestro. But everybody else, shoot it or move it.
Right.
You open, shoot it. You're not open, move it
Move
and
it.
keep moving. And we're gonna the ball finds energy and all those other kind of little sayings and stuff. But It was, yeah, like it wasn't a hard sell to the players.
Gotcha, gotcha.
Guys would come here and they would get like career highs in numbers and stuff, and
Right,
they get paid, so
right.
everyone was with it.
I remember this is a while ago, obviously, but I remember watching a Raja Bell interview where he was talking about when he first got there, and I think Mike asked him if he got 10 corner threes, could he make four of them? And Roger's like, yeah, I can do that. He said, that's all we need you to do. Like, and so it was one of those things like, just shoot this shot, and everything else will kind of take shape from there.
Yeah, I'm surprised that Roger didn't say he'd make 8 of them.
But maybe he did, but yeah, I guess the question was, can you make four? And he was like, yeah, I could do that. So, all right. So speaking of, so you guys are rolling when you get there. I as a former point guard, I love Steve Nash just because of he could do, like, there was nothing that he couldn't do. Like, I got the right hand, right foot shot from him, all that stuff, just because, like, I had never seen it done before. And you watch one of those little Steve Nash workout videos and all the shots that he made. Talk to me, I know how good he was, but how good was he? Like, like you hear the stories all the time about Steph making 50 shots in row in practice and stuff like that. Like, I imagine Steve is very similar to that in practice settings where, like, he doesn't miss.
Up until Steph Curry, I would, like, if you asked me who is the greatest shooter in the history of the NBA, I would have said Steve Nash. And that's not a disrespect to Reggie Miller or Ray Allen or all those other guys, but, like, Steve was literally excellent at every single basketball shot. Yeah. 3-pointer, mid-range, layups, wrong foot, right foot, left hand, right hand, rolling hook shots, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar sky hooks. Yep. He did them all, and he did them all with either hand. He was just incredibly skilled. The difference between Steve and Steph is that Steph embraced the aggression. When I heard Steve talk about this, like when he was working in Golden State, he said, I look back now and I realized I should have shot more.
Right.
Should have shot more, and I was being selfish by now. I thought I was being unselfish by always looking to pass, but I realized, given how good I was, I should have been shooting more because I would have created more opportunities for everybody else to put up my shot. So everything you think about him is 100% true. I remember, Steve would come in formals and, like, after Labor Day, whatever, and there would be some young rookie or whatever, and they're like, oh, get up and guard him, like, be physical and aggressive. Steve is just like, I'm just trying to get my wind back and, like, kind of get into the swing of things, whatever. And you get, like, kind of irritated, like, all right, you want to guard me like that? And then you would see that Steve had every single bit of that little whatever, street ball, like, and one mixtape. He could do all that stuff. Yeah. He'd do all that, like, make you look sham guy. He just didn't do it because he didn't have to. But he's like, oh, you want to do this? All right. Make a guy look silly and knock the shot down in their face and be like, look, man, I could do this all day. Right. But that's not the purpose of what I'm trying to do right now. Right now, I'm just trying to.
I'm working right now. Yeah.
I'm working. Exactly. So it was a joy to watch him every single day.
Gotcha. That's good stuff. He's in my opinion, I know that, like, there's a level of disrespect that I know that he gets. Like, I've heard the stuff about, him not being considered one of the lesser MVPs of the league. Yeah. In my opinion, it's like, it's disrespect. I'm sure there's a race component to it for sure. I know for a fact. Just
yeah. And by the way, like, I'm sure that there are probably some people that think the opposite, right? Like, that are like him only because he was white. But I'm gonna tell you right now, the dude controlled the game without having to shoot. It's crazy. You don't ever see anything like it.
Right.
And so, I always say when people argue about his MVPs, I'm like, you can give me an argument that Shaq should have had one of them. I'm with that. Shaq was dominant as hell those 2 years. You could absolutely. But when people start talking about Kobe, like, stop, man. That team won 45 games.
Right.
And we saw him in the playoffs and we beat him.
Yep.
Right. So it's just like, I never understood why people, obviously Kobe's Kobe, but it's just like the arguments that people would make. I'm like, when are y'all caping for like 7 seeds to win MVP?
Right.
I don't know where they get that from. Like, you want to talk about Shaq's something different, but Steve was insane, and it was just
Yeah.
his IQ and it was everything. Like he made players better.
Hmm.
I always tell people that look at the season before Steve got there, 03, 04.
Hmm.
The Suns won, I think, won 35 games,
Hmm.
36 games. And then the following year, they made 3 acquisitions. It was Steve Nash,
Hmm.
Quentin Richardson,
Yep.
Stephen Hunter.
Yep.
Team won 62 games. If you want to sit here and tell me that's because of Q and Stephen Hunter, like, all right. But he
Right.
took a team that was a lottery team,
Hmm.
had the 7th pick overall, and the next year they had the best record in the NBA. Same exact squad,
Yeah.
same coach. The only difference was this dude got on
Right.
board, and we had a couple of pretty good role players as well that
Yeah.
added. So it's just like that's why you know how good that dude is.
Right.
And the following year, Amari was hurt, and everyone thought we were going to miss the playoffs, and we ended up being like a 3 seed or whatever. And
Yeah.
again, he did it again. And if you look, I want to say between 2003,
Hmm.
2002, 2003, all the way through 2010, I want to say almost every single year, the team that Steve Nash was on had the best offense in the league.
Yeah. What else can you say?
Yeah.
What else can you say? I mean, that's not by accident at all. That's not by accident at all. You kind of grow up in the Suns organization.
Yeah.
Um, were you so you said Mark West was there? Were
Yep.
any other dark faces other than you guys and black faces other
Uh,
than you guys?
John Shoemate. John
Okay.
Shoemate, who was, I want to say, the 4th overall pick in the 74 NBA draft.
Okay.
And then yeah, it was me, Shu, and Mark West, and then we had a couple guys who were scouts, regional scouts,
Gotcha.
also.
Okay.
Um, but then again, like I said, like it wasn't that big. It wasn't like it was
Oh,
3 of
huge
us and
staff.
20
Right.
white people. It was probably
So
like
actually,
7
so
or 8
so
of
so
us.
so so the numbers are actually not
Yeah,
bad compared to most.
yeah,
Um, well, so that's an anomaly in itself then, because I mean, typically, I went to the combine this past year in Chicago, and
hmm
you kind of look around, you kind of see all the contingencies of teams, right? And
right,
it's typically
yep,
one or two of us everywhere.
yep.
What do you? I
And most
mean,
of, and most of them are former players.
former players, right, right.
Yeah.
What do you in your opinion, like I guess what do you equate the discrepancy to? I feel like it's just one of what we kind of talked about earlier. Just I mean, a lot of people talk about people are comfortable with who they're comfortable with,
Yep,
which is true,
yep.
right?
That's what it is. I think that's
So
that's what most of it is. And when it's brought to their attention that they're lacking diversity or whatever, their answer is to hire players.
right,
So, we need some black guys. Oh, so and so, remember him? He played at
hmm,
such as he played for Detroit and Houston or whatever, and that's cool, right?
right,
Like that's. I mean, I'm obviously, you need. I think every front office needs players in there,
hmm,
former players in there, because they bring a different perspective.
right,
But when your sole source of diversity comes from former players, I think that's
right,
that's problematic, right? Because the messaging is, if you're white, you can be anything.
hmm,
If you're black, you better be able to pull you up on Basketball Reference, right?
exactly, exactly,
And so like that was for me in Phoenix. I was lucky and blessed to be part of that. But as I looked around the league, I would see that there weren't many people like me.
hmm,
I was an anomaly in terms of someone of color who hadn't played in the league.
hmm,
And it was crazy to me that, that that was the case and nobody noticed that.
right. Right. It's like you said, it's one of those things like you bring it to attention, and it's just like, oh, well, like you said, the easy fix again. It's
Right.
the easy fix.
Well, and then the other part of it is look at your hiring practices.
Hmm.
I'm I got dual degrees from a top 25 business school. I graduated summa cum laude. I worked for 2 NBA teams, including one in basketball operations. I was in the middle of getting my graduate degree from the #1 sports business program in the nation. I lost a job to a high school senior,
Yeah.
right? Like, again, like let's say the kid wasn't a complete fuck up,
Right.
and he goes on and he does a great job and he works hard or whatever, and he gets to where he is in the position where he is. You can't deny that at the time
Mm-hmm.
he was not the most qualified candidate, but he got the job.
Right.
And that happens over and over again. And you can say, well, if I own a team or I own a business, I should have the right to hire whoever I want, right? That's the whole point of owning a business. That's true. But when you look at who owns these businesses, by and large, you're going to see a less diverse demographic. And so it just perpetuates itself in that they can always hire their own people.
Mm-hmm.
But good luck if you trying to do this, and like I said, don't have a tops playing card or something.
Right.
It just creates for the uneven battlefield pretty much.
For sure. It's one of those things that I my experience has been that in itself. Like it's like I always say they move the goalposts of it all the time, right? So
yeah.
First it was experience, right? You got to just have some experience. So I found a way to get experience. I worked in the CBA, went to China, figured out all these different ways to get experience, right? And then it was, well, you have to be able to give us intel, right? So like, I'm like, for me, like as a person on the street, who's going to really tell me anything of substance about anybody? Like I'm just going to call somebody randomly and get some. But the thing is, like, you figure out as who I am, I find a way to do all these things, right? So I find a way to get experience. I find a way to gather intel. Then it was like, well, analytics is the next big thing. Do you know how to code? Do you know SQL? Do you know Python? And it's like, fuck, like every time you tell me to do something, I do it. And then when it's time to talk, it's something new.
Yeah.
But you see kids come off the street with no experience whatsoever, and so that's always been the struggle for me. And, so I started something on my own, which I felt like, well, this is how I, circumvent that really,
right.
I always said at some point, hopefully they'll come knock on my door because it's hard to keep pushing over and over again for the same thing. But yeah, so it's just one of those things, but I think now, like, having been in it for a while, you cultivate relationships, that stuff helps. And, when the time comes, and you just want to be prepared as best you can. Last thing, you have a new podcast, Basketball Illuminati. Talk to me about that. I've already subscribed, by the way, so I've already subscribed. So
wherever you get podcasts.
exactly.
Wherever you get podcasts, it's wherever you get podcasts.
Yep.
No, it was, we had to do a podcast for Meadowlark Media, which is the company that Dan Le Batard and John Skipper, the former president of ESPN, started.
Mm-hmm.
And, in talking to my partner, Tom Haberstroh, I was like, I don't want to do what everybody else is doing, in the sense that every basketball podcast, whether they're great or they're awful, follows the same kind of thing. Hey, we're going to talk about this. How do you think Ben Simmons is going to fit in? Oh, James Harden, he really had a great game in that last game. Wow, are the Sixers a team to beat in the East? Oh, we got a guess. Hey, guess, how's it going? What are you up to? Blah, blah, blah. Like, hey, what do you think? Is DeMar DeRozan an MVP? Blah, blah, blah. And then, like, that's every podcast. It's the same thing. And I said, I don't want to do that.
Right.
I want to do something different. Different how? And so we started thinking about this concept. It's funny. We actually thought of the name before we thought of the concept.
Okay.
We were trying to go like, okay, what's an insider type thing? And then we're like, oh, who's like, oh, it's like the Illuminati. Oh, yeah. And so then we're like, oh, is there a way you can play on this where you can analyze the game semi-seriously, but also at some point just go out of control with conspiracy theory over it? And the more we workshopped it, the more we realized we had something. And so that's the whole thing. The whole concept is it's almost like looking at basketball like it's all a big conspiracy.
Right.
And the analysis oftentimes is real, even if the end result is somewhere out there. Like I tell people I'm playing a character. I'm not, I don't think that the league is rigged or anything like that, but I think it's funny to play someone who can take real facts and put them together and end up at a conclusion like, wait, what? Yeah. How did this happen? Why are they hiding this? What else are they hiding from us? Right. And so that's kind of like the angle and the bent. It's different. I think you're going to learn something because, again, we're not making stuff up.
Right.
We're bringing real things to the table.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, I think if you can have a laugh at it, you can have a laugh at it. And hell, if you're someone who believes in conspiracies, maybe you're going to take it like, yeah, they're right. What is the deal with, why did they hide that? Why did they erase that call? Why did,
Right.
it's just, as I like to say, I'm just asking questions. I'm just
Right.
asking questions.
I like that. I like that. So you're pretty much playing devil's advocate, or the antagonist is the character, right? That's
Yeah.
who you are. So,
Yeah.
how often are shows going to be posting?
Once a week on Wednesdays, I believe.
Okay.
But if you subscribe, you don't have to worry about what checking on Wednesday. It'll get an alert.
It's going to pop up.
Here.
Gotcha. Yeah. How many episodes have you guys recorded so far?
Two episodes in. Yeah, we already uncovered one mystery, which is this Buddy Hield 3-pointer.
Gotcha.
That didn't, for whatever reason, was scored a 2, even though it was clear. It wasn't like one of those on the line thing. The guy was like a strong foot behind the line, but they counted it as a 2 and they scored it on the shot chart as a 2, and Secaucus didn't catch it, and we dug it up, we found out, and we asked, how could this happen? How could so many checks and balances fail? Especially when you have not only gambling, people having bets on how many threes are made by the team, how many threes made by the player, how many threes made in a quarter, what the line is for the quarter, what the money line, there's all that stuff. But also, Buddy Hield is a guy who has one of the most incentive-laden contracts in the league.
Yep.
And part of his incentives are top 10 in 3 points made and a certain 3-point percentage. And removing that has an impact on that. Removing a made 3-pointer, calling it a 2, reduces his percentage, reduces the number of 3-point makes, and he could be out substantial amount of money as a result. So
every little bit, I mean, it's one of those, every little bit counts. That's the thing. So
it counts when there's money on it.
Yeah.
Like you might say, oh, it doesn't matter, they won the game. And I was like, cool, but like, what about the people who bet?
Yeah.
You're the one that invited gambling, right? Like, what about this guy who's got incentives on it?
Yeah.
Says you got to make top 10 in the league. Let's say he gets hurt tomorrow, misses the rest of the year, ends up 11th.
Yep. From that one shot.
Out. Yeah, from that one shot that should have counted. So it's like, I think we can all agree, like, hey, nobody's perfect. You get things wrong sometimes, whatever. But you can't just like gloss over and move on. You got to acknowledge it and make it whole. Because otherwise, you got chaos.
Right. And the truth is, like you said, they won already. So go fix it. It's a fucking point. Just go fix it. It's not, I mean, it is.
But to do that would to admit, not only did the ref mess up at the time, but also the Secaucus, they're like, oh, we had 30 people and there are 6 guys watching the game and a room of supervisors overhead, and like all of them missed it. And not only that, whoever was shot charting, which is not automated, it's done by hand by someone. He obviously saw it was a 3, checked, saw that everybody called it a 2, and said, erase, and I'm gonna switch it. And that's like textbook cover up.
Yeah,
that's problematic. And so now you got to answer questions. If you're the league, you got to answer questions. Oh, wait, what the hell happened here?
Yeah, it's checks and balances, and so it's one of those things. Like at some point, the ref shouldn't have missed it, but then all these other,
everybody else, ref can miss it. Everybody else can't miss it.
Yep. Especially not Secaucus, when your whole job is not to miss anything. Yeah. So okay, all right. Well, I mean, this has been a pleasure. I really appreciate you taking the time. I've taken enough of it, so I'm going to let you go. But I definitely appreciate you for jumping on with me.
That's what's up. Thank you.